same time, it's really fascinating and frustrating as well. So we can definitely say, based on the evidence, years of witness testimony, and even military footage that we started to see in December of last year, we know that there is a presence here. We know that based on a lot of research done by, again, John Mack and Bud Hopkins, that there is an abduction phenomenon. The piece that we don't know is why. So we know that there's a presence here. It's an intelligent presence. It has technology beyond our wildest dreams that we can't even begin to understand. But what we don't know is why they are here and what the agenda is. What is it exactly that they are after? So I'm with you. A lot of folks that are experiencers really describe it as a positive experience. So a lot of times it's very peaceful imagery, very loving feeling. There's accounts where the abductee or experiencer looks into the eyes of a gray alien or touches the head of a gray alien and is immediately filled with thoughts of love and peace. But from my perspective, at the end of the day, if anyone were to come into your house and take you out of your home and perform any kind of experiments on you against your will, there really isn't any way to label that except for a abnormal, non-peaceful type of event. But we also know that they have the ability to implant what's known as screen memories. So after this event happens, usually what is left over is some sort of memory that A, is very gentle and loving, or B, is completely unrelated to whatever the phenomenon is. So at the end of the day, the agenda is the missing piece that we really need to know, because that'll kind of tell us what we can expect in the future as well. But at this point, it just requires more data that we just don't have.
Well, I tell you one thing, I sure wouldn't want to be abducted. And, and just, how can I say it? I had this one game warden who wrote a book about owls. And, during the show, I brought out things when we were talking. I don't even think he realized two we were talking. And one is that, he was laying in bed getting ready to fall asleep, but he was still sitting up. And he had, he kind of lived in the area, so he didn't pull his curtains because no one could see. But in his driveway, he claims he saw some aliens, grays, walking, towards his bedroom. And all of a sudden, they appeared into his bedroom. Now, the funny thing is, all of a sudden, right after that, he started seeing owls. And, and I started saying, well, you're a game warden. Maybe you had owls in your mind. They saw that when they read your mind. So now every time you go out in the woods, because it was funny, every time he goes out in the woods, he sees a whole group of owls. And I said, well, when you go out and you see these group of owls, do you ever think they might not be owls? They could be actually grays, and they've been watching you?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories out there where an experiencer will describe something that just doesn't make sense. So to your point about owls, there's a book out there. Forgive me, I don't recall the title of the book, but it has to do with an experiencer that experienced just that, owls. And then through regression finds out that it was actually an abduction scenario that repeated over and over again. But a lot of times, one of the accounts was that the person is driving down the road and they encounter an owl. So they stop the car to get a closer look at it. And the owl looks over the hood at the person behind the wheel. So at that point, you really got to question, now, how big does that owl have to be able to look over the hood of the car into the car, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's certainly not going to be a foot tall like your typical owl is. And the person describes that this owl was 5-6 feet tall. Well, owls just don't get that big. So when we talk about screen memories, that is a perfect example where it would be pretty traumatic to be driving down the road and see a 5 foot tall or even a 4 foot tall gray alien standing there. It's not quite so traumatic to see a really large owl standing there. And you pull over and take a look at it, and then the next thing you know, you're back driving down the road, and maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours has passed by, and you really don't have anything to connect what happened in that space of time.
Well, that would be scary, let alone, at least in my mind, if I saw a 3 foot, 4 foot owl. Because where I live, we have an owl. It's a big owl, but, it's maybe like 1.5 feet, maybe, it's or not even that big. But to see
Sure.
one, that big, I'd be in shock, no matter if it was an alien or an owl, because either one of them in my mind would, hey, this is not normal,
Yeah, it's certainly way abnormal. But what you find over and over again is that experiencers or abductees have these memories that make perfect sense to them. And as they're reliving those memories in their mind, they never for a second question exactly what it was that they saw. It seems perfectly normal. So I was reading about an account of a man that when he was a young man or early teens, he had been at a park riding his bike, and he came home. And when he got home, his mother was really worried because he was like 2 hours late for dinner. So when she talked to him and said, "Hey, where have you been?" she noticed there was a couple spots of blood on his shirt. And she's like, "Oh, my God, what happened to you?" And he said, "I don't know. I fell off of my bike." So his bike wasn't damaged or scratched. He had no dirt on him or anything. He had no bruises anywhere else, but yet he had these spots of blood on his back. When she looked at his back, he had a fully healed, surgical-looking scar on his back. But to him, what happened was that he fell off of his bike. But that's as far as the memory went. So it was years later that he went through regression and found that he indeed went through an abduction scenario. And what was really interesting was that his wife was very supportive as he was going through the regression steps and therapy. And her reaction when he came out and said, "Hey, it looks like it actually was an abduction," she said, "Oh, thank God. Does that mean that we don't have to go to the park anymore?" So here, over the years, since that happened, he and his wife had kept on returning to the park, and he kept on telling his wife, "I swear there's an area somewhere in this park where it's a white room that's brightly lit. I remember it from when I was a kid riding in this park, and I really want to find that room." Well, obviously there was not a room in the park. That was actually part of his abduction scenario.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you just think about, when they're abducted, all the torture and all that stuff they're, subject to. But then again, it seems like their brain is like cleansed of that.
Yeah, so it's not traumatic. So, I mean, there are stories out there where the experiencer or abductee experiences a very traumatic scenario. But by and large, so if you follow a lot of the UFO groups, whether it be on Facebook or on Twitter or even through YouTube, by and large, there's a lot of argument around, hey, look, these are really peaceful beings that are really here to watch out for us and make sure that we save the environment and that we're more responsible as a race. But then there's another faction that says, hey, that's really not the case. So it's a big argument within the UFO community between those two very competing theories.
Well, I say this, Derek, there's a whole bunch of different species of aliens visiting our Earth. They have been for tens of thousands of years. We don't know which ones are more friendly or not, but you have to look at one thing, okay? That they might not look at us with any more compassion than we look at that Big Mac, when you go to McDonald's.
Sure.
And that's the scary thing, because you know what? Humans eat we even eat humans and have. So, we eat everything, I mean, even your best friend, your dog. I mean, in Korea, South Korea, they love eating dog. Here, you sit there and go, oh, God, that's sick. But, if some species so far ahead of us, they might not look at us as them. They look at us as no more than we look at that lamb or that deer or that chicken or, that. And people don't realize that. And I have had people on my show that come up with some real strange things. Like I had one, and I normally don't play anybody, but I had this one person that insists there's 25 million. Now I'm saying this, 25 million spaceships circling Earth cloaked to protect us. from other aliens.
Wow.
Now, I find that like very hard to believe.
Yeah, it is. But look, there's a lot of theories out there, and that's one of the things. You bring up a really good point. When I talk about how this whole UFO and alien scenario makes sense to me, I look at it this way. So let's say that we were to discover life on another planet. So what do you think the first thing we would do? So we would probably want to observe that life from afar and gain as much information as we possibly could, right?
I would think so, yeah.
And then, right, sure. And then there's going to come a time where, okay, well, we've observed pretty much everything that we can. We need to get closer. So now maybe we're getting even closer to the planet, getting closer to whatever that life is, to get an even closer look. So now, from our perspective, now we're seeing things in the sky, right? Well, there's going to come a time where, look, we've got to be hands-on. So at some point, we need a sample, so to speak. So we need to actually interact with this life or this intelligence. Now, the way that we were to go about that probably has a lot to do with the level of intelligence or sophistication of whatever that life or civilization is. So to your point, if it looks like, a flock of seagulls, we're probably not going to be as careful as we would if it looked like intelligent life, right? So if you look at the technology that it would appear that this phenomenon has, how could they look at us any differently than we would look at a flock of seagulls or a herd of goats in a pasture? Because in comparing the level of intelligence between our two species or our two civilizations, there is no comparison. So to me, that even provides further validation that, hey, what is happening here is very likely to be absolutely true, because if the roles were reversed and we are the higher, the more advanced species, we would probably be doing the exact same things, although probably not as cleverly as what they do.
Well, look at supposedly in Roswell, when that crashed of that saucer, right? They supposedly recovered bodies of aliens plus a living body of an alien.
Sure.
And, again, you can't believe what you read anywhere, but I mean, I know how we would act. I know what the scientists would do if it was still alive. They want to see after a while what makes it tick.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Roswell is a really fascinating case. So on my website, averageguyufo.com, I did an article on Roswell as well. And you bring up a really important point about, okay, it's really hard to tell what exactly went on this far removed. So we're talking about 1947 that Roswell happened, right? So as you go through and really start to do a lot of research on Roswell, what you find is that where the story started to where it stands now are two really different things. So you start off with, okay, it looks like one crash site. If you look nowadays, you'll see information on 3 crash sites, maybe 4 or 5 different crash sites. You find information as far as it being a debris field. You also find other information where there were whole crafts that were intact, that were buried into the desert through impact craters. And then it kind of starts off as, all right, it's just debris, and then it kind of blossoms from debris to bodies, and then from bodies to bodies and a living alien. So it really becomes hard to find out, well, what exactly happened in Roswell. So from my perspective, there's just no question that something crashed in the desert outside of Roswell, New Mexico. So that we know. The question is, what was it? So if you go back and listen
I don't believe it was a weather balloon. That's number one.
Yeah, you know what, and I agree with you, Gary. So for me, it really starts with the witnesses that were there. So Roswell Army Airfield is home to the 509th Bomber Group, so the only nuclear-capable bomber group in the entire world. So the men that were stationed at that base were not your normal soldiers. They were pretty advanced soldiers. Jesse Marcel was also a pretty advanced soldier. He was not your typical guy. He's a very